Nothing is what brings something into focus. And this nothingness, symbolized by the crystal, is your own eyeball, your own consciousness, and the clear space in which all the stars have freedom to be seen. The whole idea of nothing is something that has bugged people for centuries, especially in the West. Because we have a saying in Latin, ex nihilo nihil fit, which means that out of nothing comes nothing. You can't, in other words, get something out of nothing. Because what has struck me is that nothing, the negative, the empty, is exceedingly powerful. For how do we basically begin to think about the difference between something and nothing? I can say, there is a cigar in my right hand and there is no cigar in my left hand. And so we get the idea of is here and isn't or empty here. But behind that, of course, lies the far more obvious contrast of solid and space. But to suggest how very powerful and important this nothing at all is, let me point out to you that if you didn't have space, you couldn't have anything solid. To begin with, without space outside the solid, you wouldn't know where the solid's edges were. For example, you can see me on the camera because you see a background here and all around me, and that background shows up my outline. But if that wasn't there, then you would notice, say, only the beads and the microphone here, and this would become the background. But you always have to have a background to see a figure. You just can't do without it. So that means that the figure and the ground, the solid and the space, in some way are inseparable and go together. To have the whole idea of there being only space and nothing else at all is not only inconceivable but perfectly meaningless, because we always know what we mean by contrast. We know what we mean by white in comparison with black. We know life in comparison with death. We know pleasure in comparison with pain, up in comparison with down. But you will notice of all these things that they must come into being together. You don't have first something and then nothing, or first nothing and then something. Something and nothing are two sides of the same coin. Now, we all know that energy is always vibration, pulsation. Whether it be the energy of light or the energy of sound, it's always on and off. When you hear a high note, it seems much more continuous. That's because the vibrations are faster than a low note. Now, in that, you can hear a kind of graininess. And that graininess is because you are hearing the rapid alternations of on and off on a lower note. So that all wave motion is this process. You could call, you see, you get this dividing line here between above and below. Now, isn't it obvious, first of all, you cannot have the emphasis called a crest, the concave, without the de-emphasis, or convex, called the trough. They necessarily go with one another, so as to have anything standing out, there must be, as it were, something standing down or standing back. So in this way, we must realize that if you had this part alone, the up part, that would not excite your senses in any way, because there would be no contrast. But to have sound, you must have the alternation of sound silent, sound, silent, sound, silent. Now the same thing is true of all life together. We shouldn't really contrast existence with non-existence, because actually existence is the alternation of to be and not to be, of positive and negative, of on and off. So you could say existence is eternal, if we are to consider existence as this alternation of now you see it, now you don't, now you see it, now you don't, now you see it, now you don't. It is that contrast that presents the sensation of there being anything at all. Now, another thing that goes along with all this is that it's perfectly obvious that the universe is a system which is aware of itself. In other words, we as living organisms are forms of the energy of the universe just as much as the stars and the galaxies. And through our sense organs, this system of energy becomes aware of itself. But there's a puzzle in this, which again relates back to our basic contrast between on and off and something and nothing, which is this: that the aspect of the universe which is aware of itself, that is to say, the aspect which, to put it in a very clumsy phrase, does the awareing, does not see itself. In other words, you can't look at your eyes with your eyes. You can't kiss your own lips. You can't bite your own teeth. You can't observe yourself in the act of observing into one half known, one half unknown. And so it's all made up of off and on, and therefore equally of conscious and unconscious. But the unconscious is, so to say, the part of experience which is doing consciousness, just as the trough manifests the wave, the space manifests the solid, the background manifests the figure. And so all that side of life which you call unconscious, unknown, impenetrable, is unconscious and is unknown and is impenetrable because it's really you. In other words, the deepest you is the nothing side, is the side which you don't know. So in this sense, don't be afraid of nothing. But people in our culture are terrified of nothing. They're terrified of death. They are uneasy about sleep because they think it's a waste of time. And they have a lurking fear in the back of their minds that all this universe is eventually going to run down and end in nothing. And it will all be forgotten, buried and dead. But this is a completely unreasonable fear, because it is just precisely this nothing which is always the source of something. Think of it once again in the image of clarity. We say crystal clear.